Good morning, Atlanta Apparel. I'm Terence Morris, Senior Vice President of Gift Leasing and co-captain of IMC's Diversity and Inclusion Network. I'm thrilled that you're here to join us at Atlanta's Apparel Virtual Education Series, Atlanta Market. Today, we're going to have a very candid and great conversation about retail and diversity. I'm very excited about today's conversation because, as we all know, we are in a very new time in our country, a time where we're having some very candid, different conversations, and in some ways, very difficult conversations, but conversation about change that's necessary. And diversity falls into that category and also falls into this conversation. And today's discussion will lead us to diversity in retail. I will tell you that I've been in this industry for approaching 30 years now. And although we've made considerable progress, there's no question about that, there's a long road ahead of us. There's a lot more things that we need to get done. I'm equally excited about today's conversation, and that is because of our speaker. And let me give you a little bit of her background. DeAnna McIntosh is a result-driven retail consultant with 14 plus years of experience helping brands drive sales, conversion, productivity, innovation, and engagement. DeAnna is the founder and global retail e-commerce consultant at the Affinity Group International, where she is an international liaison facilitating, profitable partnerships between indie brands and boutiques and the greater retail industry. Her work is instrumental in moving the retail forward through strategically building and elevating the indie retail economy in both developed and emerging markets. Passionate about innovating the retail experience at all stages of business development, DeAnna collaborated with other retail consultants to launch the Retailing Evolved community. Inside, she teaches indie brands and boutiques the same merchandising strategies used inside the billion-dollar brands she works for. After the senseless murder of George Floyd and seeing the awakening of retail companies to their own lack of diversity, DeAnna launched diversifiedretails.com to connect two communities she loves, the retail community and the communities of color. So without a doubt, I'm really happy and excited to have this conversation kicked off with Diversity in Retail with this webinar series, DeAnna. DeAnna, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited that we're doing this today. We're going to have a little bit of fun. I have a lot of questions, so just feel free to just be very candid with us because we're excited about your experience.
Thank you.
We talked about, we did a little bit of a brief introduction, but we would love for you to tell us more about your background, where you started, and your journey as it is today.
Sure. So a lot of people I talk to seem to have stumbled into retail at some point, right? But I actually knew since middle school that it was the industry for me. And I always had a love for fashion and retail. And even in high school, I would run to the library and find books about like product development and different areas of the industry. One, so I could convince my parents that it was an actual career. But, just to make sure that this is definitely what I want to be doing with my life. And so from there, I graduated from FIT in New York. I have a degree in international fashion merchandising management. And the international part is because I studied abroad in Florence, Italy for a year, spoke fluent Italian. Don't ask me to speak it now. But that was really my first taste of the industry at a global scale. And I just fell even deeper in love with fashion and just the industry as a whole. And so after graduating, I got my first job as a buyer at Chico's in Fort Myers, which was also my first taste, unfortunately, of what I'd be facing as a person of color in this industry. And I went live recently on my Instagram just about my experiences, but since we're talking about it, just give like a little glimpse. I was one of two buyers that was a person of color out of maybe 35. And that really happened throughout my entire career, which is a little discouraging, right? And then I would go to trade shows and be, again, one of few people of color shopping as a buyer. And then on the exhibitor side, there was very little people of color on that side as well. And so it kind of just makes you wonder, like, where is the rest of the industry? Where are the people of color who make up the population of the world? And why is that missing from our industry? And so I've been through a lot in my career, different things. And it's not necessarily, I wouldn't say, everyone's racist. No, I would never say that. Sometimes it's just that you had those experiences. right? So if you didn't grow up around Black people, you're not going to have the same experience or the same knowledge as someone who did. Or if you're a Black person and have not grown up with white people, you're going to have a different experience and a different take on things. So even the president of Chico's asked me in the bathroom, "Is that a weave?" And I was like,
That's a personal question.
like, that's not appropriate, right? So there's just a lot of things that opened my eyes in my first job out of college, and even till now, having been in this industry for so long, that I really want to see change, and I want to see us all embrace diversity. So I'm just really grateful to have this conversation with you.
Well, I'm glad we're having it, and I may get off of script, so. But I would like to ask the question because like you, I've been in this business I've been in the industry for roughly over 25 years. And I too attend trade shows all the time, and I don't see people of color. I'm one of the very few, I think, African-American executives in the business. And I wonder, and where are we? But like, are we not familiar with the industry? Is it like, I'm confused because it's a big industry. It's a huge industry. I'm not sure why we're not represented. And maybe that's because we're not, to your point, we're not reaching out to, or we're not going to recruit and areas in which, where we are. So, but it's interesting. Just a few minutes on that. Where do you think we are? What do you think it's a lack of interest, if a lack of knowledge? What would you think as a guest?
I would say a lack of knowledge, not necessarily lack of interest. And going back to my own experience, I grew up in Chesapeake, Virginia, not a diverse area at all. Right. And when I said I wanted to major in fashion, my dad was a CFO and my mom was a speech pathologist. And they were like, no. So I think our community is a little more hesitant to do careers that are off the beaten path, so to speak. Right. So me going to the library all the time and showing books and, talking to different people kind of help with that. But I think that might be some of it, that we don't know that retail could be an actual career path. And because, I went to FIT in New York, and I would say that was pretty diverse because it was in New York. But, Florida State, I know, has a fashion merchandising program. I'd love to see how diverse that is, for example. So I think, like you said, we definitely need to do some more education and outreach in the communities of color about the industry.
Great. That's true. I have just wondered that myself, and especially for the amount of time that we've been in this industry, that it hasn't. Another question is, our industry has changed, as we're talking about. COVID-19 was the first wave, and then Black Lives Matter. That movement has been a global awakening. And consumers are calling for a level of transparency deeper than ever before. So I ask you this question. It's kind of a two-part question. How will your company show up, and what does diversity look like for you?
Yeah, and I think with that, it always goes back to looking at yourself. Any issue, really. Who are you as a person, and what do you stand for? What are your values as a business owner? And if one of those values are diversity, inclusion, equity for all people, have you been using that same thought process, and do those values align with the people that you hired? With the products that you carry in your store? Are you carrying products by people of color? And then your messaging that you're putting out. Because I know you saw all the Black squares that flooded Instagram last month. Well, there were quite a few companies, a lot of companies, who did that. And then quickly in the comments, you can see that people know that that's not really your heart, that's not really your value, because you're saying one thing on social media, but then at your corporate office, where you have no Black leadership executives, is saying a completely different thing, right? So I think that it always goes back to, what are your values, and are you willing to put your money, your time, your effort, your communication towards that?
Very, very good. So you've been in the retail industry for 14 plus years now. What is your biggest piece of advice for getting started with diversity and inclusion in retail?
Have the hard conversation. The conversation we're having right now, have it with your team. You have to, because if you decide today, maybe diversity and inclusion wasn't a priority for you, or you didn't even think about it before, but you're committing today to do that, you have to make sure that everyone else in your organization is aligned to that. And if they're not, that's another hard conversation that you're going to have. But think about it. You can make all the efforts that you want to, in your office. But if someone walks into your store, if someone like me walks into your store and I'm profiled, or you have a code name for people of color, your messaging, your values are not aligning. So it really starts with looking inside at you. What are your values? And then having those conversations to make sure that your values are being played out in everything that you do.
Agreed. Why is it so difficult for people to have that conversation?
I think because it can be really charged up, right? Because everyone's not aligned. Everyone doesn't understand, first of all, why we even need to have this conversation. And I've seen a lot of people say, if we want racism to go away, stop talking about it. Like, that never fixed anything. I know your parents didn't teach you that. You wouldn't tell your kids that. Oh, that's not how this works. And so it can be a heated conversation if someone is starkly against diversity and inclusion. And a lot of people don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation. But I kind of look at it as, being a Black person, you're aware every day of your Blackness, unfortunately, right? So the things that people are seeing now are things that we've had to go through every single day of our lives. So you having that one conversation, you can do it. You don't have to deal with this every day. Just one conversation will make a world of a difference. And not just your life and the people that you're talking to, but people of color's lives, an entire community of color. So that one conversation can make a world of a difference, and you just have to toughen up and have it.
Yeah, and I think that the initial point is that your willingness to have the conversation is the biggest hurdle. I think once you get past that, the conversation, not that it will be easy, but it will it will make sense, because I think what's happening in today's time, what I look at it as, when I'm asked the question now, what is it African American people are looking for, my quickly is like, we just want to be heard, and we want you to listen. That's all. I mean, I think it's so. It's that conversation. Like I said, it's not hard to have that conversation if you're willing to have the conversation with an open mind. So I agree with you wholeheartedly there.
Yeah.
I'll ask you, for some stores, this may sound like a major overhaul with everything going on with COVID-19, obviously, and navigating those waters and everything else. So how do we get retail stores or brands, including leadership, on board with diversity and inclusion initiatives?
I would say talk to your own associates. I've seen a lot of companies now, when this movement first really took off, to have conversations and just talk to your associates. You should be able to trust them, I hope. And they definitely have opinions, and they will absolutely tell you what they are really quickly. And so just making sure that you are relying on the people who work for you to hear them out, because if there are people of color in your community already, or in your on your staff, talk to them. Let them tell you what you're doing wrong and ideas on how to fix it, because then you have a direct source to hold yourself accountable, right? So that is definitely something that I'd recommend. And also, your customers, if you have an online store, which I assume most of you, if not all of you, do by now, ask for pictures of your customers wearing your items. Because most likely, if you have an e-commerce store, people from all walks of life are buying from you anyways. And so ask for pictures, and then ask for why they love your company. And you can do a whole social media campaign highlighting your own customers, which hopefully are people of color. And if not, you might just have to give some discounts, or like gift something or something, work with me here. But, and then you'll have a whole campaign about your customers from all walks of life who love you, which will also show people from all walks of life that you welcome them into your store.
Nice, thank you. What are some of the tangible things that they can do that may be low in cost and that require minimum efforts that they may not be thinking of?
I would say you already have a marketing budget. How much of that budget is geared towards attracting people of color? Because again, you probably never thought about that, but you should.
Right.
Now,
Right.
from today forward, think about your marketing and making sure that everything that you do speaks to who you are, your values of diversity and inclusion. So there are influencer marketing agencies that have influencers of color on their roster. There's even one who I know, Noir Management. He specifically has influencers of color on his roster. And so looking for opportunities like that will help you. And also the next time you get ready to make a buy, you already have a buying budget. What percentage of that can you allocate towards buying brands of color? And then once you have those brands of color, I'm sure they have marketing images of people of color that you can use. So it's not so much that it's like, I have to create a whole strategy, but just infuse people of color, communities of color into everything that you're doing currently.
I mean, I listening to you, if you're going to do this, I think you have to fully invest in it, though. You can't.
Yes.
You have to be committed to it. You can't it's not like, you can't dabble in this. This is not like you have to either commit to this change happening or not do it at all. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think a good example is there's a company who's calling for Black designers. And then they said, well, we're not going to actually buy them to go in our stores. We're going to have them on consignment. And even if they sell well, we're not going to commit to carrying them. That's kind of what you're talking about. Like, you don't do that to all of your other designers, so you shouldn't do that to Black designers. We're just asking for a level playing field, right? The same amount of opportunities as any other brand, like you just said. So yes, there's no gray area here. It's literally you're for it or against it. You want diversity or you don't.
Right. And I mean, if you're going to bring in the African-American customer, and from a consistency perspective, if I'm going to shop your store, I need that this is not, again, one-off types of things, that I can use you as a reliable resource as it relates to products. I mean, it's not, like I said, I think that you see where people will have, say, greeting cards in their store, and they'll have a small of greeting cards that will reflect the African American community for the most part, which is though it's hard to find. I mean, it's not, you don't find it that easy.
Is going to agree with it or see the importance of it. And again, that can lead to difficult conversations or difficult actions that you're going to have to take as a business owner. And again, if you're not a person of color, you're likely not paying attention or seeing a lot of the things that we see. For example, at the last event that you attended, did you notice that there were no speakers of color? Or when you went to the trade show, did you notice that there weren't many buyers or exhibitors of color? Or when you shop for hair and makeup, did you notice that anything that was a person of color type shade was confined to a smaller selection? Or there might be little pieces all throughout the store. Band-Aids don't match your skin tone. Bras don't, like wedding dresses and the mesh and wedding dresses. You probably didn't notice those things before, but maybe you will now. And I think you just have to make sure, like you said, you're about it. It's a part of your values. It's a part of your company. And anyone who is not on board with that, unfortunately, is just not a good fit for your company anymore. So you just have to have that same energy as if this person wasn't performing, because trust me, if diversity and inclusion is not a part of their value system, the way they treat your customers is not going to be aligned with the way you envision at all. So it's going to be hard, and some people won't make it through it, but you as the business owner and as the leader have to set the example. So
I think you have to have
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have, first of all, you said this earlier in the conversation, you have to have people of color working with you and for you in order
Exactly.
to understand what's necessary,
Absolutely.
you know,
That's so important.
unless they hire you.
That can be done too. You know what? I think a great example just came out. Oh my gosh, this morning, Marnie, the Italian brand. Oh my gosh, now it's slipping my mind. Oh, they had a marketing campaign called Jungle something. That's another thing. If you have someone of color on your leadership team, you would know. You do not do a campaign called Jungle something with dark skinned models. And then one of the pictures had chains by the feet of the black man who was in the photo. Prime example. You know, you can't do things like that. That's a
Seriously.
blatant. Yeah, seriously. I saw it this morning and I was just like, how? How? You have to have people of color, people of all walks of life on your team to make sure that this doesn't happen. You know, it's you can look it up.
But listen, that's the reason we're having this conversation today, that we
yeah.
hope and help people understand not only the sensitivity to it, but I mean, just really kind of, it's things that you would think that it would be just natural, but it's not.
No.
And
No, unfortunately not.
So when thinking about it, the importance of representing brands and that are diverse and inclusive, we struggle with wanting to represent our employees' models from unrepresented populations, but we also do not want to tokenize anyone. So how do we approach to ask them to be in our photos without making them feel that way?
That's a great question. I think this whole movement and just diversity and inclusion conversations, you have to always lead with transparency and authenticity. And that carries on into those type of conversations. If you know your organization is not diverse, these employees already know that. They've talked about it at this point. You might not know, but they've definitely talked about it probably from day one. Have that conversation with them and say, we know we have a diversity problem. That, you know, be clear. And we're coming to you because we need you to be the champions for this organization so that people just like you know that we welcome them here. So we're not trying to use you as a token. We want to use you as more of an ambassador and a champion, that we want diversity and we need your help. That's how I would do it.
Interesting. I like that. Thinking of brand representation and how social media like Instagram is a glimpse of what brands value and stands, how can social media imagery be more representative? What are some of the steps for implementing diversity?
I think, again, if you carry brands of color, then talking to them and even collaborating with them for photo shoots or having some type of deal where, because they know if you're in the community, you know other people in the community. So if you have issues sourcing Black models or things of that nature, they can help you with that. So just making sure that you have your own allies for your organization and vice versa. So buying brands of color and then collaborating with them on images, or again, getting with influencers of color so that they can be promoting your products and you get those marketing photos in exchange. So there's so many ways, you know, and even looking for Black brands or brands of color, hashtag Black owned or hashtag, you know, Black creatives. There's so many hashtags that you can look up to find people that align with your design aesthetic.
And I think that leads into the here. I said, we've talked a lot about how to begin implementing, but who's doing it well? Who comes to top of mind?
Calvin Klein. If you go to their Instagram, their literal bio is unequal is unacceptable. Black Lives Matter. Like, doesn't get more clear than that. And, yeah. Doesn't get more clear than that. And when you scroll, again, they're not just saying it. And I buy Calvin Klein, so I know. They're one of the few brands that are mass market who sells bras that are multiple skin tones. Like they actually have a nude for me. I was shocked. But when you go to their social feed, you see people of all ethnicities and backgrounds. So they are definitely an example. And a newer brand, well, like they have a cult following at this point, is Cult Gaia. They're another example. You'll see not only just, Black women, but Black women with braids in their hair, which is a whole issue, working in corporate retail. If you wear braids, it's a problem in a lot of cases. Or, I had a coworker who wore braids because she went on vacation and was told to take them out before she came to work. So, the fact that this brand has a Black woman in braids on their Instagram and they're celebrating it in the culture, that means that they truly are in touch with the culture and they're not just doing it for show, to me.
So, I mean, other people are slow to the game. What do you think is holding them back? Do you think it's because they are afraid of losing people versus, because I think a lot of it, I think a lot of times, people think that if I become sensitive to this, or, like the whole Black Lives Matter as a whole,
right?
People are careful about, when they express their support of Black Lives Matter, it is, they're very careful about it. Why do you think that is? That's just
right.
What's your take on that?
I think it's a lack of courage because, again, you're either for it or you're not. And an example I would say is I was watching a church service last week, and it was about teaching the congregation about racism. And there were so many comments that I was like, ooh. There were so many triggering comments, and the church was deleting them. And then I saw people saying, like, why are you censoring the comments? And what the church was doing was deleting those off the wall comments and then messaging them separately to explain to them why their thought process is a bit off or explaining to them why, Black lives do matter. And so I think that a lot of people are just scared about the backlash because there will be backlash. But again, you have to know what your stance is and stand by it at all costs and be prepared for the backlash. We get backlash every day just for our skin color. So, I think that really is what it is. And I've seen it. You can go on different brand social media pages, but know that you're going to get backlash if you don't say something, and you're going to get backlash if you do. So which side are you on?
Yeah. And actually, it's interesting because I don't know if it's really backlash. What you're doing is exposing, you're exposing people.
Right.
Sure. And so if you are making choices based on those types of things, then I would think you would not want that business. And
exactly.
I would think that you would want some new. You're in business to grow your business, and you can only grow your business if you include everybody. I'm a strong believer in that. You have to, if you can, there's only so many people in certain races and creeds and everything else. So if you want to grow a national business, it's because you're going to be international, right? So you have to have international mindset. So I agree with you there. What would you take away from today's conversation? Like, what's your biggest thing that you feel? What comes to mind as we talk about this? What do you think? What do you want to say to everyone that we're talking to today? What's your big takeaway?
My takeaway is that I want people to look inside and see who you're really about, see what you're about, and see if you've ever had an experience, a talk with someone who does not look like you. Some of us haven't. But if that's in your heart to get to know the Black experience or someone else who doesn't look like you, their experience, and be able to open your mind, open your heart to really, really understand. Because a lot of people I hear, will say, well, a Black person would say, I shouldn't have to educate them on what they need to do, or I shouldn't have to teach you about our history. Well, our history isn't in school books. So I don't want you to have to Google how to treat me or what I experienced in corporate retail, because you can't Google that. You only know by talking to me and having these type of conversations. And I think that's what's missing. You know, too many people talking at each other and not to each other to understand truly what is going on, because racism is not a myth. I've gone through it. We've all gone through it. It actually exists, okay, every single day. It's not. But if you talk to me and hear my experiences, my human experience, you would be able to relate to that more. So I say definitely, please make it a point to talk to somebody and get to know somebody who does not look like you. And to make sure that, again, if diversity and inclusion and equity for all, that is important to you, make sure that that's reflected in your business operations, because everything makes a difference.
Well said. And I would, going back to something that we said earlier, it's not even about talking sometimes. Sometimes it's just about listening.
Yes, true.
And when you're listening, and not only just listening, but really hearing what's being said, that, I mean, that's really kind of, you know, and understanding you don't have to have an answer for everything, but if you are able to relate to or understand or be sympathetic to someone's feelings, that goes a long way. Because a lot of times that's all people really want. People just want acknowledgement, you know. With everything going on, our company has started, as I said earlier, a diversity and inclusion program itself. And, you know, I want to read to you the model that we had for our organization. It's stronger together, greater when we're equal. And
I love that.
Yeah, it speaks volumes, you know, because, you know, it's just really about us all being able to exist in this one place, you know, America. It really, that's what it's all about. I mean,
yes.
It's anything other than that. We can agree to disagree, but we can do that, you know, respectfully. I think we can respectfully do that. Well, I want to thank you for your time today. I mean, I think that you have been very insightful, and I appreciate your candor, but I also appreciate your experience and your willingness to share it with us today. And I hope that we can have this conversation again soon.
I do too, and thank you so much for this conversation, because again, this is how it starts. It's just having these open, honest conversations that give a little bit more insight into our experience within the industry so that we can all come together and create change.
Well, I think I feel comfortable that, you know, after this conversation, some change will start happening. So again, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. We'd look to speak to you soon. And thank you all who joined us. And we look forward to seeing you guys in the next series. Have a great day.
Yeah.